I'm Julie, 24 female. I live in a modest, 3-bedroom house that I own outright, a fact that still feels surreal sometimes. I built my digital marketing agency from nothing, starting in my cramped teenage bedroom with a second-hand laptop and an almost terrifying amount of determination. My life now is comfortable, stable, and a world away from the constant financial anxiety of my youth. But that comfort came at a cost I never could have predicted. It made me the target of the 3 people who were supposed to be my biggest supporters, my own family. They believe my success wasn't earned, but stolen from the life my older sister was supposedly owed, and they were willing to drag me through hell to take it back. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Growing up, our house was filled with the low, constant hum of financial stress. My dad, David, worked long, grueling hours as a warehouse manager, and my mom, Karen, was a homemaker, stretching every dollar until it screamed. They weren't bad people, not then, but they were perpetually worn down by life. Their dreams had been ground down into the simple, pragmatic goal of just getting by. For my older sister, Jessica, this environment was something to escape through fantasy. She was always the pretty one, the charming one, the one everyone said was destined for a life of ease and glamour. She spent her days sketching dresses, practicing makeup looks, and talking about the day she'd be discovered and whisked away from our boring suburban life. Our parents ate it up. Every school play she was in, every compliment from a stranger, was treated as evidence of her impending stardom. She was the family's lottery ticket, and they pinned all their vicarious hopes on her. I was the other one, the quiet, practical one. While Jessica was dreaming, I was observing. I saw the stacks of unpaid bills on the kitchen counter. I heard the hushed, tense arguments about car repairs and grocery costs. I knew destiny wasn't going to pay the mortgage. My path wasn't going to be about being discovered. It was going to be about building something for myself, brick by boring brick. My fascination wasn't with glamour, but with systems. Specifically, the burgeoning system of social media. While my friends were just posting selfies, I was fascinated by how a simple post could reach thousands, how a small business could build a following, how influence could be manufactured. It was a puzzle, and I wanted to solve it. The summer I turned 19, I decided not to go back to my part-time job at the local diner. I took the $1,500 I had painstakingly saved and officially registered my own business. I called it Amplify Digital. My parents were baffled. "A business? On the computer?" my dad asked, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Honey, why don't you focus on your studies, or get a real job with a pension?" my mom suggested, her voice laced with concern. But it was Jessica's reaction that stung the most. She laughed, a genuine, condescending laugh. "Oh, Julie, that's cute," she said, scrolling through her phone. "Let me know when your little computer game makes you a millionaire." It was a throwaway comment, but it lit a fire in me. The first 2 years were brutal. I was a full-time college student during the day and a one-woman marketing agency at night. My office was the corner of my bedroom. I lived on instant noodles and cheap coffee. I cold-emailed hundreds of small businesses, offering my services for next to nothing just to build a portfolio. Most emails went unanswered. The ones that did reply were often skeptical. "You're 19?" they'd ask. I learned to project confidence I didn't feel. Using industry jargon, I'd learned from YouTube tutorials and marketing blogs hours before the call. My first client was a local bakery struggling to get foot traffic. I charged them a paltry $200 a month. I designed their social media profiles, ran small, targeted ads, and organized a free cupcake giveaway that went locally viral. Within 3 months, they had a line out the door every weekend and had to hire 2 new staff members. They tearfully told me I'd saved their business. That feeling was more addictive than any caffeine. It was proof. I printed out their thank you email and taped it to the wall above my desk. It was my first brick. Word of mouth started to spread. The bakery owner recommended me to a friend who owned a boutique. The boutique owner recommended me to a local real estate agent. My client list grew slowly, then all at once. By the time I was 21, I was earning more than my dad. I was still living at home, but I started quietly paying for things. I'd lend my mom a few $100s for groceries, which I never asked for back. I paid the internet bill, then the electricity bill. I replaced tea. The broken dishwasher they'd been complaining about for a year. They accepted the help, but never truly acknowledged where it was coming from. In their minds, I was still just playing on the computer. Jessica, now 23, was working part-time as a waitress and spending the rest of her time trying to become a fashion influencer, which mostly involved her taking photos in expensive clothes she would later return. My success was an inconvenient truth they preferred to ignore. The turning point came when I landed a major client, a national skincare brand that wanted to target a younger demographic. It was a 6-figure contract. The night I signed it, I sat in my car for an hour just crying, not from sadness, but from overwhelming relief. The weight I'd been carrying my whole life, the fear of ending up like my parents, trapped and exhausted, had finally lifted. I had done it. I had built my own lifeboat. I used the money to hire my first 3 employees, lease a small office space downtown, and, most importantly, pay off every single penny of my parents' debt. Their mortgage, their car loans, their credit card bills. I cleared it all. I thought it would be a moment of pure joy, a grand gesture of love that would finally make them see me. I was so naive. Presenting my parents with the paid-off statements was one of the most anticlimactic moments of my life. I had imagined tears, hugs, a celebration. Instead, I was met with stunned silence. My dad, David, stared at the paid in full letter from the mortgage company as if it were written in a foreign language. My mom, Karen, kept picking it up and putting it down, her expression a mixture of shock and suspicion. "How," she finally whispered, not looking at me but at my father. "How did you do this, Julie?" "My business, Mom," I said, my voice filled with a pride that was quickly deflating. "It's doing really well. That skincare contract was huge. I wanted you guys to be free of all this. No more debt." Jessica, who had been observing from the doorway with her arms crossed, let out a short, sharp scoff. "So you're rich now, must be nice." "It's not about being rich, Jess," I said, turning to her. "It's about being secure. It's for all of us." "We didn't ask you to do this," my dad said gruffly, finally finding his voice. He folded the papers neatly and placed them on the coffee table. There was no thank you. No acknowledgement of the years of worry that I had just erased. It was as if my gift was an accusation, a spotlight on their own perceived failures. The conversation awkwardly sputtered out, and I left their house that evening feeling hollow and confused. I had given them the greatest gift I could, and it felt like they resented me for it. Despite that strange reaction, a weight was still lifted. I was free, and for the first time I could think about my own future. For the next 2 years, my agency exploded. We picked up more national clients and I hired more staff. I was a leader, a CEO, and I was good at it. I was 24 years old, and my personal savings account had a number in it that my 19-year-old self would have considered a typo. It was time to get my own place. I didn't want to rent. I wanted to put down roots. I wanted a home that was mine, a physical testament to the security I had built. I found the perfect place in a quiet, established neighborhood about 20 minutes away from my parents' house. It wasn't a mansion. It was a charming 1960s ranch-style home with a big backyard and a beautiful old oak tree. It needed some cosmetic updates, but it was solid and felt like a real home. Because I had no debt and a substantial income, I was able to do something I'd only ever dreamed of. I bought it in cash. The process was clean and simple. No mortgage, no bank. Just a transfer of funds. The day I got the keys, I was giddy with excitement. I drove over to my parents' house, clutching the small, brass keys in my hand. "I have news," I announced, walking into the living room where they were watching TV. I bought a house. Again, that strange, flat reaction. "Oh," my mom said, not taking her eyes off the screen. "Where is it?" "It's over in the Northwood area," I said, my smile faltering. "It's really nice. I was thinking, since you guys don't have a mortgage anymore and the house is getting a bit old, maybe you could sell this place and buy something smaller and I could help you with it." That got their attention. My dad muted the TV. "Sell our house? This is our home, Julie. We've been here for 30 years. "I know, but—" "And Jessica lives here," my mom added, her tone becoming sharp. Jessica was now 26, still living in her childhood bedroom, her influencer career having amounted to a few thousand followers and a lot of free but cheap products. "Right," I said carefully. "But Jess is an adult. She could get her own apartment. I could even help her with the deposit." Jessica, who must have been listening from her room, stormed. "Ed out, I can't believe you," she shrieked, her face red with anger. "You finally get a little money and now you want to kick us all out on the street? You want to get rid of us." "That's not what I said." I was completely taken aback. "I'm trying to help. I just bought a house. I thought we could all improve our situations." "Your situation seems pretty improved already," my dad said, his voice low and cold. "Buying a house for cash must be nice to not have to worry about anything." The atmosphere was suddenly thick with resentment. It was no longer about my news. It was about my success and how it made them feel. I tried to backtrack to explain, but it was too late. The lines had been drawn. I left shortly after, the joy of my new home completely overshadowed by their bitterness. The next day, I started moving my things. I thought that with a little space, things would cool down. I thought they would eventually come around and be happy for me. But the distance didn't bring perspective. It seemed to curdle their envy into something far more toxic and deliberate. The happy family I thought I was working to save was already gone. I just hadn't realized it yet. The first few months in my new house were a strange mix of blissful peace and unsettling silence. I loved the quiet mornings, sipping coffee in my own kitchen. I loved painting the walls, picking out furniture, and planting a garden in the backyard. It was my sanctuary, but the silence from my family was deafening. My calls to my mom were met with short, clipped answers. My invitations for them to come over for dinner were always met with a vague excuse. "Your father's tired." "Jessica isn't feeling well. We're busy." I saw them only at obligatory family gatherings, like Thanksgiving, which was held at my aunt's house. The tension was suffocating. My parents and Jessica would sit in a tight, isolated cluster, speaking to me only when necessary. My aunts and uncles, who had heard I was doing well, would ask me questions about my business. As I'd answer, I could feel the glare from my family across the room. After I mentioned a recent business trip to New York, Jessica muttered, just loud enough for the people nearby to hear, "Some of us have to work for a living." The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. The entitlement started subtly. It began with my mom calling me with a sob story. The refrigerator had died. The old one I'd bought them a few years back. It was a good brand, but she insisted it was a lemon. "I just don't know what we're going to do, Julie," she sighed dramatically into the phone. "Your father's paycheck is already stretched so thin this month." It was a clear, calculated manipulation. A few years ago, this would have been a genuine crisis for them. Now, it was a test. I sighed and said, "Don't worry, Mom, I'll take care of it." I ordered them a new, top-of-the-line refrigerator online and had it delivered the next day. The thank you I received was a brief text. "It's here." A week later, it was my dad. The car was making a funny noise. He took it to the shop and the estimate was $2,000. "The whole front axle needs to be replaced," he said, his voice heavy with manufactured woe. "We'll have to just let it sit, I guess. I'll take the bus." Again, I caved. "I'll transfer the money, Dad." Then came Jessica. Her requests were bolder, wrapped in a thin veil of professional need. "Julie, I really need a new laptop for my influencing," she announced over the phone one day. "My old one is so slow, it's impossible to edit my videos. It's really holding my career back." I knew for a fact her video editing consisted of applying filters on her phone, but I was still trying to be the peacemaker. I sent her money for a new MacBook. 2 days later, she posted a picture of herself on a weekend trip to a beach resort with the caption, "Treating myself, #boss babe." There was no MacBook in sight. The final straw in this slow bleed campaign was about the house. My mom called me. "Julie, your father and I have been talking," she began, her voice sickeningly sweet. "This old house is just getting to be too much for us to maintain, and with Jessica needing her space to work on her brand." She paused for dramatic effect. We were thinking, your house has 3 bedrooms, doesn't it? It just makes sense for us to move in with you. We could sell this place and have a nice nest egg, and we could all be together again. We could even help you around the house. I was speechless. The audacity was breathtaking. They didn't want to visit for dinner, but they were ready to move in and take over my sanctuary. No, I said, my voice firmer than I intended. Absolutely not. The sweetness in my mom's voice vanished. What do you mean no? After everything we've done for you. Everything you've done for me? I almost laughed. I paid off this house, I bought your appliances, I paid for your car repairs. My house is not a solution to why. Our problems. You are so selfish, she shrieked, and I could hear my dad and Jessica in the background. This is what happens. You get a little bit of money and you forget where you came from, you forget your family. Jessica was supposed to have a life like yours. She was the one with the talent, the one with the promise. You just got lucky with that stupid computer thing. This is her life you're living, and you won't even share a tiny piece of it. The words hit me like a physical blow. Her life I'm living, I repeated, my voice trembling with a mixture of hurt and rage. I worked for this, I sacrificed. I spent years grinding away while she was waiting to be discovered. This is my life, and you are not welcome to move into my home. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking. I finally understood. They didn't just want my money. They felt entitled to my entire life. In their twisted narrative, my success wasn't mine. It was a cosmic error, a fortune that had been delivered to the wrong address. It belonged to Jessica, the chosen one, and they were determined to correct that error one way or another. The phone call was the end of the requests, and the beginning of the war. After that explosive phone call, I enforced a strict boundary of silence. I blocked their numbers. I told myself it was for my own sanity, a temporary measure until they came to their senses. Part of me, a naive, hopeful part, still believed they would. I imagined a tearful apology, a recognition of how horribly they had behaved. For about a month, the silence was a relief. I focused on my work, poured my energy into my agency, and enjoyed the quiet solitude of my home. The peace felt fragile, but I clung to it. The illusion shattered on a Tuesday afternoon. I had just come home from a long day at the office, looking forward to a quiet evening. As I walked up my driveway, a man in a nondescript sedan parked across the street got out and approached me. He was holding a large manila envelope. "Are you Julie?" he asked, his tone flat and professional. "Yes," I said, my guard immediately up. "Can I help you?" He didn't answer. He simply handed me the envelope and said, "You've been served." Then he turned, got back in his car, and drove away. I stood frozen on my own front lawn, the heavy envelope feeling like a block of ice in my hands. My heart was pounding in my ears. "You've been served." The phrase echoed in my mind, nonsensical and terrifying. I had no business disputes. I had no personal conflicts with anyone. Who could possibly be suing me? With trembling fingers, I tore open the envelope. I pulled out a thick stack of papers, the top sheet bearing the official seal of the county court. The words at the top made my blood run cold. Civil complaint. Plaintiffs David, Karen, and Jessica. Defendant Julie. I sank down onto my front steps, my legs suddenly unable to support me. I read the names again and again, convinced my eyes were deceiving me. My own parents, my own sister, they were suing me. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the papers steady. I forced myself to read the complaint, my mind reeling in disbelief. The legal jargon was dense, but the core of their claim was both ludicrous and deeply insulting. They were suing me for financial support and restitution. Their lawyer had crafted a narrative that was a masterpiece of fiction. It claimed that I had built my business based on an implicit familial agreement. According to the lawsuit, there was a spoken understanding that my success would be used to support the entire family, and specifically to fund Jessica's career as an artist and media personality. It alleged that my business ideas were not my own, but were developed through family brainstorming sessions and were inspired by Jessica's innate understanding of modern trends. It went on. It claimed that by paying off their debts, I had established a pattern of financial support which I had then maliciously and abruptly withdrawn, causing them emotional distress and financial hardship. The most outrageous part was the demand. They weren't just asking for a monthly stipend. They were demanding a staggering 50% ownership stake in my company and retroactive payment of 50% of all profits I had earned since the business became profitable. And as a final, cruel twist, they were filing a lien against my house, claiming it was purchased with familial funds that I was merely holding in trust for them. They were trying to take everything: my business, my money, and my home. I read the document 3 times, and with each reading, the deep, soul-crushing hurt was slowly being replaced by a hot, white-hot anger. This wasn't just a grab for money. This was an attempt to erase me. They were trying to legally rewrite history, to codify their delusion that my life belonged to them. The long nights, the ramen noodle dinners, the constant stress, the years of sacrifice, they were trying to claim it all as they. Our own. The part about my ideas being inspired by Jessica was the most galling. Jessica, whose only contribution to any brainstorming session was asking me to fix her Wi-Fi password. I sat there on my steps until the sun went down and the sky turned a deep purple. The streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows across my lawn. My lawn, my house, my life. A cold, hard resolve began to form in the pit of my stomach. They had expected me to crumble. They had expected me to be the quiet, accommodating Julie who would give in just to keep the peace. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness. They had no idea who they were dealing with. They had started a war, but I was going to be the one to finish it. I stood up, walked inside, and looked up the number for the best litigation attorney in the city. The time for being a good daughter and a loving sister was over. The next morning, I walked into the law offices of Vance and Associates feeling like a raw nerve. The firm was located on the top floor of a downtown skyscraper, with panoramic views of the city I now called home. Everything about the place, the polished marble floors, the quiet hum of professionalism, the scent of old books and fresh coffee, was designed to project an aura of power and control, things I felt I had completely lost. I was led into a large corner office. Arthur Vance stood up from behind a massive mahogany desk to greet me. He was in his mid-40s, with sharp eyes, a perfectly tailored suit, and an expression that suggested he had seen everything and was surprised by nothing. He had been highly recommended as a ruthless but brilliant litigator. Right now, ruthless and brilliant was exactly what I needed. "Julie," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Arthur Vance, please sit. My assistant said it was an urgent family matter." I sat down and, without any preamble, pushed the lawsuit across the desk toward him. "My parents and my sister are suing me," I said, my voice flat. He put on a pair of reading glasses and began to read. For 10 minutes, the only sound in the room was the soft rustle of paper. I watched his face, trying to read his expression, but it was a perfect mask of professional neutrality. He read every single page, his eyes scanning back and forth. When he was finished, he took off his glasses, leaned back in his chair, and looked at me. "Well," he said, a small, almost imperceptible smile touching the corner of his mouth, "this is certainly ambitious of them." "Is it?" I asked, my voice cracking slightly. "Can they do this? Can they actually win?" "In America, anyone can sue anyone for anything," he said calmly. "Winning is another matter entirely. This lawsuit is built on a foundation of pure fantasy. Implicit familial agreement, inspired by your sister's innate understanding of trends, this is the legal equivalent of a fairy tale. Their lawyer knows it's weak, but he's betting on the fact that you're family. He's hoping you'll be horrified by the prospect of a public, ugly court battle and settle for a ridiculous amount, just to make it go away." He paused, his gaze intense. "So, let me ask you the most important question, Julie. Are you willing to settle, or are you willing to fight?" "Fight," I said, without a moment's hesitation. The word came out stronger than I expected. "I will not give them one single penny that I haven't already gifted them. I will not give them a single share of my company. I will not let them take my house. I will fight them with everything I have." Arthur's smile widened slightly. Good, that's what I was hoping you'd say, because we're not just going to fight this, Julie. We're going to dismantle it. We're going to make them regret they ever walked into a lawyer's office. This is not about money for you, is it? It's about the truth. It's about everything, I whispered. Exactly, he said. So, here's our plan. Phase 1 is discovery. We need to build our case and prove that their claims are not just false, but preposterous. I need you to gather every piece of evidence you have, every email to a potential client from when you were starting out, every receipt for your business expenses, bank statements showing your income growth, your college transcripts to show you were studying and working simultaneously. We need to paint a picture of your journey, one that leaves no room for their fiction. He continued, I also want every text message, every email, every record of every single time you gave them money. The refrigerator, the car repairs, the money for Jessica's laptop. We will document their requests and your generosity. We will frame their lawsuit not as a claim for what they are owed, but as a continuation of the financial extortion they began months ago. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. I felt like I was an archaeologist digging through my own life. I spent hours sifting through old emails, bank records, and cloud storage. I unearthed the original Busin S registration from when I was 19. I found the first cringeworthy marketing materials I had designed myself. I compiled a spreadsheet detailing every dollar I had ever given my family, complete with dates and reasons. Each piece of evidence felt like a stone being added to the fortress wall we were building around me. Arthur's team got to work. They filed a formal response to the lawsuit, denying every single allegation in the strongest possible terms. Then, they went on the offensive. They filed a motion to dismiss the case as frivolous. They also countersued. This was Arthur's idea, a strategic move designed to put my family on the defensive. We countersued them for fraud and attempted extortion, citing the pattern of financial requests followed by the lawsuit when I finally said no. We also sued for the legal fees I was now being forced to incur. This will show them we're not playing games, Arthur explained. They thought they would be the only ones throwing punches. Now they have to defend themselves. They'll have to sit for depositions. They'll have to answer our questions under oath. Let's see how their story holds up under scrutiny. The most painful part was preparing for my own deposition. Arthur grilled me for hours, playing the part of their lawyer. He was relentless, picking at my story, trying to find holes. So, you never discussed your business with your family? Not once. Why did you give them so much money if you didn't feel obligated? Isn't it true that your sister is a creative person and you are not? It was brutal, but it prepared me. It stripped away the emotion and left only the hard, verifiable facts. The battle lines were drawn. The initial shock and hurt had been replaced by a cold, clear sense of purpose. My family had tried to define me by their narrative of entitlement and jealousy. Now, in a court of law, I was going to define myself by the truth. The day of the hearing for our motion to dismiss was overcast and gray, matching my mood perfectly. The courtroom was smaller and more sterile than I had imagined from TV shows. It smelled of floor polish and old paper. I sat beside Arthur Vance at the defendant's table, my hands clasped tightly in my lap to stop them from shaking. Across the aisle at the plaintiff's table sat my family. My father, David, looked uncomfortable and out of place in an ill-fitting suit. My mother, Karen, was dressed in her Sunday best, her face a mask of practiced piety and victimhood. And then there was Jessica. She was wearing a trendy, expensive-looking outfit, probably bought with the MacBook money, and had a faint, smug smile on her face as if she were the star of her own reality show. They refused to look at me. Their lawyer, a slick man named Peterson, went first. He painted a picture of a simple, loving family who had poured all their emotional and conceptual resources into their youngest daughter, only to be cast aside once she achieved the success they had collectively envisioned. He used words like trust, understanding, and familial duty. He spoke of Jessica's creative genius and how I had merely operationalized her ideas. It was so far from the truth it felt like I was listening to a summary of a movie I'd never seen. When it was Arthur's turn, he stood up and walked to the lectern with a quiet, powerful confidence. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't use dramatic rhetoric. He just used facts. "Your Honor," he began, "what we have here is not a legitimate legal claim. It is a work of fiction. A desperate, after-the-fact attempt to lay claim to the fruits of one young woman's extraordinary labor." He then proceeded to dismantle their case, piece by piece, with cold, irrefutable evidence. He presented my business registration documents. This business was founded by Julie, and Julie alone, when she was 19 years old. He presented my college transcripts. While running this business, my client was also a full-time student, demonstrating a work ethic that is frankly staggering. He presented the sworn affidavits from my first clients, including the bakery owner, who all testified that they had dealt only with me and had been amazed by my skill and dedication. The turning point came when Arthur addressed the claim that my family was the source of my ideas. He looked directly at my sister. The plaintiffs claim that Jessica's innate understanding of modern trends was the foundation of my client's company. So, let's talk about Jessica's business acumen. He pulled out a thick binder. These are printouts from Jessica's social media accounts, which she claims is her profession. As you can see, her follower count for the past 3 years has remained stagnant at a modest number. Her engagement rates are below average for an account of its size. He then showed the judge printouts of Jessica's posts. Here she is on a beach trip, posted 2 days after my client sent her money for a new laptop to build her brand. Here she is advertising a miracle tea from a multi-level marketing company with a history of fraudulent claims. This is not the profile of a marketing genius, Your Honor. It is the profile of a hobbyist. Jessica's face went from smug to blotchy red. My mother shot a hateful glare at Arthur. My father just seemed to shrink in his chair. Arthur wasn't done. He moved on to the money. The plaintiffs claim my client established a pattern of support she then maliciously withdrew. Let's look at that pattern. He presented our spreadsheet, detailing every dollar I had given them. Here is the date Julie paid off their mortgage. Here is the date she bought them a new refrigerator after receiving a call from her mother. Here is the date she paid for their car repairs. And here, he said, his voice dropping slightly, is the record of a phone call which my client documented immediately afterwards, where the plaintiffs demanded to move into her home. When she refused, and only after she refused, did they file this lawsuit. He paused, letting the silence hang in the air. This is not a case about a broken promise, Your Honor. This is a textbook example of extortion. It's an attempt to punish a daughter for having the audacity to become successful on her own terms and for daring to say no to their ever-escalating demands. The judge, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, had been listening intently, her expression unreadable. She looked over the evidence Arthur had presented, then looked at my family and their lawyer. "Mr. Peterson," she said, her voice sharp, "I have read your complaint, I have heard your arguments, and now I have seen Mr. Vance's evidence. Can you please explain to me what factual basis, beyond wishful thinking, your clients have for a 50% stake in a company they did not found, did not fund, and did not work for?" Peterson stammered, trying to relitigate his points about familial synergy, but the judge cut him off. "That's enough," she said. "The legal standard for a claim like this is incredibly high, and you haven't come close to meeting it. You have presented feelings, not facts. You have presented entitlement, not evidence." She looked directly at my parents and sister. Her voice was cold. "You should be proud of your daughter. You should be celebrating her success. Instead, you have chosen to drag her into a courtroom with a baseless, insulting, and frankly greedy lawsuit. You have embarrassed yourselves, and you have wasted this court's time." Then she delivered the final blow. "The motion to dismiss is granted, with prejudice, which means you cannot file this frivolous claim again. Furthermore, given the evidence presented of a coordinated effort to extract funds from the defendant, I am finding in favor of the defendant on her countersuit. The plaintiffs will be responsible for all of Julie's legal fees. This court is adjourned." The gavel came down with a sharp crack that echoed the sound of my old life shattering for good. It was over. I had won. Jessica burst into tears. My mother stared at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. My father just looked down at the table, a defeated old man. I felt a surge of triumph, but it was quickly followed by a profound and aching sadness. I had won the battle, but in the process, I had lost my entire family. Leaving the courthouse felt like surfacing for air after being held underwater for too long. The gray sky had broken, and a sliver of sunlight cut through the clouds. Arthur Vance walked beside me, his briefcase in hand. "Congratulations, Julie," he said, a genuine smile on his face. "You were brave in there, you stood your ground." "Thank you, Arthur," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "For everything, I couldn't have done it without you." "You did the hard part," he replied. "You lived it. Now you get to live the rest of it on your own terms." He shook my hand, gave me a respectful nod, and walked toward his car, leaving me alone on the courthouse steps. The final bill for Arthur's services arrived a week later. It was, as expected, a substantial amount. I paid it without flinching. Then I sent a certified copy of the invoice along with the court order to my parents' address. A few weeks after that, a check for the full amount arrived in the mail. It was a cashier's check, sent from their bank. There was no note, no letter of apology, nothing. Just the cold, hard transfer of funds. I knew that to pay my legal fees, they would have had to sell their house, the house I had paid off for them. The irony was bitter. In their greedy attempt to take everything from me, they had lost the one major asset they had left, the very home I had tried to secure for them. The news of the lawsuit and its outcomes spread through our extended family like wildfire. It became the definitive story, the one that would define us forever. My aunts, uncles, and cousins divided into predictable camps. Some called me, offering quiet, tentative support, ashamed of my parents' behavior. Others sided with them, buying into the narrative of the selfish, ungrateful daughter. I received a few nasty, anonymous-sounding text messages, which I blocked and deleted without a second thought. I made a conscious decision to withdraw from all of it. The family I had known was broken beyond repair, and trying to pick up the pieces felt like trying to glue together dust. I threw myself back into my work, but this time it was different. It wasn't about survival or proving myself anymore. It was about passion. I loved my company, my employees, and the work we did. We continued to grow, and my reputation in the industry solidified. I was no longer the 19-year-old kid trying to fake it. I was a respected professional. About a year after the court case, I learned through a cousin that my parents and Jessica had moved into a small, run-down apartment complex on the other side of the state. My dad had been forced to take on a second job working nights to make ends meet. My mom, for the first time in 30 years, had to get a full-time job as a cashier at a discount grocery store. And Jessica? Her influencer career was officially over. With no money for new clothes or trips and no picturesque house as a backdrop, her feed had devolved into angry, typo-ridden rants about how unfair life was. Her followers dwindled, and eventually her account went private. They had gotten what they wanted, a life without my interference. They were living the consequences of their own choices. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a grim sense of satisfaction. It wasn't joy, but the cold, clean feeling of justice. They had made their bed of resentment and entitlement, and now they had to lie in it. But the real victory wasn't their failure, it was my peace. I sold the house they had tried to take from me. It held too many bad memories. With the proceeds, I bought a beautiful piece of land a little further out from the city and worked with an architect to design my dream home from the ground up. It was a home built not on debt or family drama, but on my own hard-earned success and peace of mind. I have a new family now, one of my own choosing. It's made up of close friends who have been with me through the darkest times, my amazing team at work who feel more like partners, and a wonderful man who loves me for who I am, not for what I have. My life is full. It's happy. It's secure. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that 19-year-old girl with her second-hand laptop and a crazy dream. I wish I could go back and tell her that her hard work would pay off in ways she couldn't imagine. And I'd warn her that sometimes the people who are supposed to lift you up will be the ones who try the hardest to pull you down. But I'd also tell her not to be afraid. I'd tell her that her strength isn't in her bank account, it's in her backbone. It took a lawsuit from my own family for me to finally see it, but I see it now. My name is Julie, and this is my life. I earned it.